This is a series of reflections on teaching translation technologies, and we've met the issue of technologies at various points in this subject so far. Here, I'm particularly interested in the way it fits into the problems of curricula, and that is of sequencing. As we know from our top down analysis, everything should come from a needs analysis. What do our graduates need when they go out to be employable? Now, I'm presenting here some of the research done by Yuhao when we asked graduates from the Master of Translation at the University of Melbourne, what skill do you wish you had acquired more of? That is, what should we be doing more in our training of translators? And the skills have been categorized in terms of colors here, where technology is that pinkish sort of color. And I'm not too sure that market awareness is really technology unless you define it as awareness of the technologies needed. But the technologies are not really at the top there, they're in the middle. So, although there's plenty of employers who say, oh, we need translators who know the technologies, and we have employers in big companies complaining that graduates don't know enough about technologies, that's not quite the feedback we're getting here. However, Yu has broken this down, as you can see here. Here are the people who get work in translation and interpreting. Here are the people who work in languages in a wider sense, and here are the others. And it's very clear that the technology is of much more importance for translation and interpreting at the top here than it is for language workers in general or people who go out and do a range of other things using their skills. So we can say, I think, that if we're talking about employability as translators and interpreters, and that's only about a third of where our graduates go, yes, they are important. But more generally, no, we shouldn't overemphasize the case if indeed we are training for language workers in general. Some other data on the same kind of needs analysis. This is from the big CEOTI survey that we mentioned previously, where we found, and I looked at this last week, that foreign language training is the most important thing. General translation courses, cultural studies is up there, research skills. These are all soft skills. So where is the technology here? Well, yes, it's up there. 37% is not too bad. And we could add in software localization and terminology management. So it is part of the skill set that is needed, but it's not at the top level. Okay? Here's some other data. This is from the European Language Industry Association 2019. It's a survey of companies and translators and actually trainers in Europe. What is interesting to me here is that the big translation companies are investing a lot in machine translation and automated workflows than the smaller companies. So this is telling us that the need for technology skills is not universal. It's not the same for everyone. And it is greater at the top end of the market where most of the money is being made. Okay, so there is a connection there. The same report makes it very clear that the big money is moving at the top, and that the smaller companies and freelancers are not rapidly increasing their profitability. So machine translation, automated workflow, and the smaller segment, the smaller players in the market, are using translation memories, although much less machine translation. Okay, so I'm just distributing or trying to present the needs analysis as something that has to be focused. If you know exactly where your translators are going, what they're going to do with it, then you can focus on certain kinds of technology, I think, and say where it has to be done. What you can't do, I think, and this is the common presupposition in some of the older programs, is think, well, when we're training somebody, you go from the easy things to the hard things, and technology is hard for me, for you, the teacher, therefore we'll do it at the end of the training. And we found that, I think, in Kelly, in the model of the undergraduate program in translation that she presented. Wrong. Why is that wrong? Well, let's just go at how wrong it is. Because everyone these days needs technology. Okay, the other thing is you do it in a special place. No, that's wrong. Everybody needs technology, and everybody needs a laptop, at least, if they're going to be doing translating, or really any learning with technology. So instead of doing it up here, you want to do it down here, or you want to do some of it down here and some of it up there. Okay, I think a growing solution is to give everybody basic work in pre-editing, post-editing, and translation memories down here, and also terminology work, because the interpreters need that as well, and then have advanced technology classes happening up here. And if you like, you can do that for interpreting, but it's not done so much. Okay. In our master here at the moment, we do have translation technologies as an elective. What then might you want to do at the initial level down here? Well, I think you should emphasize a range of technologies. I'll come to that in a minute. You're going to have to look at machine translation, explain what it is, explain what it can do, and what it can't do. And then when people understand what it can't do, you're going to have to be doing some post-editing down there, and pre-editing as well, since that's one of the major ways we have of working with machine translation technologies. Terminology is a logical thing to do down here at a very basic level, the level of glossaries, because then you can get the translation memories and the glossaries that can be used in translation memory tools. And at the basic level down here, quite honestly, I would just use the freeware that's available on the web. This year we're doing WordFast and MateCat, for example, both of them. So students get to transfer their skills from one to the other. And the basic reason for that is that they're web-based, so we don't have a problem with PC versus Macs or compatibility of operating systems. Okay. Usually at that basic level, I'll get people to work on 2 translation tools, and they'll have all this training at a very basic level. And then they have to pick up a 3rd tool, learn how to use it, do a translation with it, working in pairs, and they've got 2 hours to do that. And they can do it. What does that mean? They've learnt not just how to do all these things, but they've learnt how to pick up new technology, make sense of it, use the learning resources that are available on the web, and they've learnt to learn. And I think that's the most important skill to develop at the initial level down here. You can or cannot throw in subtitling. I do, because it's fun. And I think all language learners should get basic training in subtitling, because they can do their favorite video clips and bits of TV series and enjoy seeing the product of their work. At the advanced level, though, it's going to look similar. And here I'm just giving a list of what we actually do in the elective that we have in the master. It's the same, but the translation students are here obliged to do Trados, which is the market leader in translation memory software. It's also fairly complicated. It's not easy to learn. It has lots of features, lots of terminology especially, lots of quality control, lots of, well, some project management features built in. So we spent quite a while doing Trados, as you can see, and the terminology and project management is done in that environment. The thinking here is that If you can use the most complex tool that's out there and the one that looks best on your CV, those skills can be transferable to any of the simpler systems that you might want to use. Okay, so it's a different way of thinking, I think. Uh, there's also then project work. We do a 2-week project where the technology is integrated into group work in a company, a simulated company environment. And we look at website localization and I think a bit of game localization, although there's not a lot of special technology required for game localization. Okay, so that's what an advanced level training course might look like. It has some of the features here that are shared. There's going to be repetition, of course, but it's doing them at a more advanced level and at a more professional level. We can also do a little bit more theorizing about the impact of the technologies. The problem with that kind of planning is that there is still resistance to it. And here is a resistance statement from Brian Mossop. If you can't translate with a pen and paper, then you can't translate. Meaning, we have to train people to translate with a pen and paper, because if you haven't got those skills there, all the technology in the world is not going to make you better. I don't know if that's still true, but let's take it as a legitimate expression of concern and a focus on saying that real translation is not with technology. I would have as a retort, these days, if you can't use technology at all, you can't get a job. So what does it mean to get a job? Well, okay, you have to be able to translate and do all these other things as well. Okay, so I don't think these are incompatible statements. I think we can make them compatible, and the way you do that will give you a lot of clues about how to organize a training. I would also say to Mossop, well, do you think we're only going to use pen and paper? Surely we have to use other technologies, such as computers, for example. If you define the learning outcomes carefully, you can navigate quite successfully between those two positions. It's a question of avoiding the wrong questions, not getting the right answer, just avoiding the wrong questions. And I get these not questions, they are statements. I get this whenever I do presentations on machine translation or post-editing. A human can always translate better than a machine. It's an opposition. That's not the question. The question is this: a human with technology can translate better than a human without technology. That is, the machine is not your enemy, it's your friend, and you've got to work out the best ways to be friendly with it. This is just saying that doing post-editing is more efficient and gives better quality than translating from scratch. And we can do tests, we do experiments to demonstrate that. There are many provisos, depending on the quality of the machine translation, depending on your field knowledge, etc. But, okay, this is a better statement to pursue than this one, which is just living in denial, to be honest. If you look at the contemporary machine translations, they are not translating, strictly speaking, they are picking up human translations and recycling them in devious and rather clever ways. So we could also retort the systems are not translating anyway, but I won't go into that here. Translators will say, I don't use technology. Mossop might say that. I say, well, no, your pen and paper, that is technology. Writing is technology. Using an alphabet is technology. A computer, a clock, electronic communication, a calculator to figure out how you get paid, all the internet resources you can incorporate, all that is technology. And I think part of the battle here is to make people see that technology is more than machine translation, is more than something that's going to take work away from you. It's going to help you work better. One of the things I do at the beginning of any course in technology is point them to this rather dated 2016 website where translators talk about the tools that they use. Little free tools around the place. Lots of them are time on task tools, so you keep track of how long you're spending on a job, and so you can charge for it if by the hour and rather than by the word. Other things are really useful. One that I did pick up from this site was text-to-speech tools as a revision instrument. So these days, if I finish a translation or when I finish a translation, I just get the computer to read it out with a voice, and I sit back and I listen to it, and I pick up so many mistakes or infelicities, stylistic things that could have been better. And I pick it up because it's sort of more natural listening to the voice than me trying to read a text on the screen. Okay, so it's just making that step and saying, look, guys, you're using technology all over the place. Don't just limit it to machine translation. Don't just limit it to a thing you're seeing as your enemy. A lot of the debates, I mean, I really have been in these debates. I've been in a translation training institution with my fellow teachers, and I have had all these very good professionals say that top level translators do not use translation memories or do not post them. And they've just said that to me. And at that stage, this was a few years ago, I could get out Lagudaki's research. He did a survey. It was basically in the UK and Europe, but it showed that 72% of her sample of the people surveyed were using translation memory software. And I say, look, they are using it. Perhaps you are not. But hey, let's face it, we, the teachers, we are an older generation, and the younger generation are using it. It's not the same for all, and that's a very hard message to get across. The younger you are, the more you have grown up with these technologies. Not as an add-in, not as something I might do in the second year of my master program or in the fourth year of my undergraduate program. You've grown up with these things all the way. It's been part of your learning experience. And I think that's the message we have to get across to our fellow teachers and the people who define curricula and syllabi. If you define the learning outcomes carefully, you can incorporate technologies into the learning process for virtually any learning outcome. Not as an outcome in itself, but as a tool, as something that can be incorporated into the activity. And that's how I think we should be looking at technologies in translator training, and I think in language teaching, especially second language teaching. That is, use it as a learning tool. Not just MT, but MT is the big thing that's advancing and has been radically advancing since 2016. It can be used as a dictionary, as a comparative grammar tool, as a source of suggestions. And I shouldn't have to show you this, but I can. Okay? This is I took this from Yu Hao again, it's from 2000, but it's just very useful. Different ways that people can interact with computers. Okay? So, from humans must make all decisions and actions at number 1, and number 10, I don't know why 10 is at the top, where the computer does everything and there is no human interaction with it. Okay? And most of what people who dislike machine translation, most of what they're objecting to is this, where the machine gives you one translation and you accept it. Right, that is not a good way to use machine translation. It comes from this false belief that this is the translation. It's what people who don't know about translation think that machine translation is doing for them. But you can use these other ways of interacting with computers. Okay? You can narrow the selection. You can use it to narrow your selection down to a few. Okay? Um, or it can give you a whole list of alternatives. And I would be interested in moving downwards on that list, okay? But you can also move upwards if you want, okay? I'll just give you some examples. This is an example I've used elsewhere. When you use, here's, what is it, Google Translate as an online dictionary, which you can, it is a dictionary in that it gives you one alternative. But if you read down here, you've got a whole lot of information, such as what you would find in a normal dictionary. And it can be used in that way, as a source of suggestions rather than dictating one translation. DeepL does the same thing. Over here, it gives you alternative translations. And if you're not happy with it, you click on that and you get all these alternatives to choose from. So it becomes a very quick and easy online dictionary being used in context. Lingway, which is associated with DeepL, does the same, but you have previous translations to look at, and you can test what you think works by looking at sentences similar to the one you're working on. I shouldn't have to show you these things, I'm sure you all know them. And then it's just one step to how you're going to use that in a translation memory. Okay, when what you don't want to do is just accept that as the only viable translation, you can use all these other tools to think of other things to do. This comes back to a very basic proposition about what translating is and what is the fundamental skill that we're trying to get people to improve in. Now, I propose this. Translating is a two-step process. It's a very simple model. You've got a problem in your ST and you generate alternative ways of solving that problem, all these TTs, okay? And then, if you're translating, you have to select one and you'd have to do it quickly. Now, all the technologies we've got, all of them, help us with this generation process. It helps us get the alternatives and get some information out there quickly. And then some of that information, usually the explanatory and contextual information, can help us select the one we want. But the main use of the technologies is in the generation of alternatives. The selection still requires soft human skills, because there are no rules for a translation problem as such, and it has to be done with justified, that means trustworthy, that means ethical confidence, and this is the hard part. This human skill of selecting between alternatives in order to achieve a communicative aim that is successful, that is the hard skill of translating. And that's the part that you really have to do. And if you can't do it without a pen and paper, you can't do it. The technologies should be used across the board at that part of the process. And we have to get people to use very human skills in the second selective part. So much for teaching with technologies.